All right, welcome everyone to our second webinar in our Early Career Researchers program, How to Review a Review Manuscript. I'm Amanda Ferguson, IFT staff. I'm the director of our Scientific Journals program. IFT, if you're not familiar with us, is a nonprofit scientific society that was started in 1939. We're headquartered in the United States, but we serve the global food science community. Our journals program directly supports IFT's mission and vision by promoting and advancing the science of food through the research and review articles that we publish. The journals uphold IFT's core values within our editor, author, and reviewer communities, which include a diverse network of scientists worldwide, and by upholding research integrity through the highest standards in education on our best practices. So IFT convenes a global food community focused on improving the food system. Our nearly 11,000 members come from 90 countries, representing over 3,000 organizations and 500 colleges and universities. We span the global food value chain with members across sectors of the workforce, and our student association, IFTSA, is a network for students which provides additional resources and networking opportunities. The Feeding Tomorrow Fund supports the development of emerging food science and professionals through scholarships and grants. So if you're not a member, please check out our website, ift.org, and look at our membership options. I have a few housekeeping items for the webinar. You can use the chat to post your resources and insights. You can talk to each other in the chat, but please submit questions for the panelists using the Q&A feature. So look for that Q&A button on your Zoom screen. This is being recorded and will be posted to IFT's YouTube channel, and we'll send out the recording link early next week. So just to get us started here, IFT's journals publish two different kinds of review manuscripts. The Journal of Food Science, which is our flagship journal, publishes concise reviews, and we define that as under 8,000 words in the main body text. So that excludes references, tables, and figure captions. For concise reviews, because they are about the same length as experimental manuscripts, we allow 2 weeks for the first round of review. So if you agree to be a reviewer, you're given a 2-week deadline. And for revisions, we give 1 week. Of course, if you're a reviewer, you can always ask for an extension if you need longer than that. In our comprehensive reviews in food science and food safety, which is our reviews journal, and some of the editors from that journal are here to talk today. We define comprehensive reviews as being over 8,000 words in the main body text, and we generally allow up to 15,000 words, sometimes a little longer if necessary. And we give an extra week to reviewers because those manuscripts are a lot longer and a lot denser. So we give 3 weeks for the first round of review and typically 1 week for revision rounds. With that, I would like to introduce you to IFT's Early Career Researchers Program leader, Professor John Coupland, who will introduce the panelists and get us started. All right, John.
Many thanks, Amanda. This webinar is part of a program that IFT journals are conducting to try to improve the quality of reviewing and bring a new generation of scholars into the review and editorial process. We'll be running a series of webinars. We had one last year about experimental papers. We've got one this year on now about review papers, and there'll be more about the editorial process and publishing ethics. IFT recognizes that publication depends on a community of scholars, and we're really trying to encourage new people, a new generation, to join our publishing community and really to make the quality of science as high as it possibly can. With that, today's focus is on review papers, and we're lucky to have Dr. Don Schaffner, who's a scientific editor of the comprehensive reviews in food science and food safety. He's also a distinguished professor at Rutgers and is currently chair of their food science department. He's a food microbiologist interested in questions of hand washing, cross-contamination, and risk assessment. He's a fellow of the Institute of Food Technologists, and also the American Academy of Microbiology and the International Association for Food Production and the Society for Risk Analysis. He's a experienced podcaster, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in this format. I'm sure you've all seen his Food Safety Talk podcast, which is compulsory listening, I believe, in the field. After Don's presented, he'll be joined by Marcy Magnani. She's an associate editor for Comprehensive Reviews, and she's also a professor in the Department of Food Engineering at the Federal University of Paraíba in Brazil. She's also a food microbiologist with an interest in food safety and predictive microbiology. She's very much involved in coordination of food science in Brazil, where she's a research productivity fellow of CNPq in Brazil and also works with FAO, WHO. So with that, I'll pass over to Don, and good luck.
Thanks, John. I am not using my podcast microphone today, although I do have it right here. I'm not using it because it blocks my face. But podcasting is an audio format, and this is a webinar. So let me go ahead and share my slides. And there we are. Let me get into the right mode here so you can see my whole screen. So yes, continue to share. So yeah, so thanks to John and to Amanda for welcoming us here today. Thanks to Marcy for joining, and thanks to Andrew for being on the call as well. So the topic today is how to review a review manuscript. You may ask yourself, or I certainly ask myself, why am I doing this talk? What do I know? What special knowledge do I have? Well, the primary reason why I'm giving this talk is that John asked for volunteers, and I volunteered. I have a huge admiration for societies like IFT and others that are run by volunteers. And so I think if we want these groups to be successful, we need to volunteer. I do have a little bit of experience. I was an editor for the ASM journal, American Society for Microbiology journal, Applied and Environmental Microbiology for many years. I'm currently an editor for Food Microbiology. I'm the editor-in-chief for Microbial Risk Analysis, and I am a scientific editor for Comprehensive Reviews. I was previously an associate editor prior to becoming a scientific editor. So I don't know if how many review articles I've reviewed, but I've certainly handled a lot of review articles. I've issued a lot of editorial rejections for poor quality or unneeded review articles. So I certainly, since starting on my journey with IFT and Comprehensive Reviews, I certainly have gotten my feet wet in the area of reviews. So a little bit about the process. What actually gets sent out for review? And I've phrased this as a series of negatives. Articles that are sent out for review are ones that are not rejected by the editor-in-chief. Mary Ellen sees all the articles that come in, and she does quite a good job of not sending many of them on if she just judges them to be of inferior quality or not needed. The next step in the process is the scientific editor. I reject a lot that never go out for review just because they're just, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the rest of my talk. If I think something might have some merit, but I'm not completely sure, I will communicate that to the associate editor. So for example, I'll assign a review to Marcy and I'll say, Marcy, I looked at this and I don't think it's so terrible that we should reject it, but I'm not really sure that it meets our quality standards. And Marcy will take it from there. I also work a lot with Laura Jackson, who I send a lot of manuscripts to as well. And it is possible that whether I give them feedback or not, the associate editor will make the determination not to send it out to review. And so, the way it works is that Mary Ellen has to be an expert in everything related to food science, and she's not. And then it comes to me, it's probably microbiology oriented, but there are areas of food microbiology where I don't consider myself an expert, and so it gets passed down. And as we move down that inverted pyramid, we're getting people that have more and more expertise. And then, of course, finally, when it gets sent out by the associate editor, hopefully it's being sent to reviewers that have the specific subject matter expertise that we need to handle the review. After I had said yes to giving this talk, I then began to think about, well, what will I say? And I thought I would start and really finish in the directions that are provided to reviewers who review manuscripts for comprehensive reviews. And so I'm going to go over each of these areas in turn. If you've ever done a review for comprehensive reviews, you'll see these questions, these question prompts in the review in the review box when you go to submit your review. So we're going to talk about scientific quality and originality, impact on the field, scope and relevance, clarity of presentation. We're also going to talk about the recommendation that you give and what I do with that. We'll also talk about the box where you can provide confidential comments to the associate editor. And then finally, the actual meat of the review itself, the comments to the author. And I'll talk about each of these in turn. In terms of scientific quality and originality, the prompt says, does the manuscript contain interesting information? And interesting is an interesting word. Interesting is a subjective assessment, but we're sending it to you because we want your opinion. If you think that the topic is not interesting, you can check the box that says no, but please don't just say no. In your written comments, either to the editor or to the author, please tell me why it's not interesting. Or if it is interesting, then tell me why you think it's interesting. Because we want to publish stuff that's interesting. Same thing for the prompt, is the topic unique? If you think the topic is not unique, click no, but then please tell me more. What about it makes it not unique? Maybe there's other review articles. Now, remember, hopefully this, and I'll talk a little bit about my screening process, but hopefully if something is really, truly not unique, it will have not made its way to you. It would have been screened out. But if one does get through to you and you don't think it's unique, tell us about that, because we don't want to publish stuff that's just that everybody else is publishing, right? We want to publish interesting and unique articles. And the next prompt is a bit of a long one, and it says, if other reviews on this general topic have been published in the past 3 years, does this manuscript offer significant new insights or better coverage? Now, again, as I said, this should have already been screened out by the scientific editor, and so hopefully that's just moving something off my screen here, sorry. So hopefully, again, the scientific editor or the associate editor will have screened this. Just because there's one or two reviews recent reviews on a similar or the same topic doesn't mean that we don't need this review, especially if there's something new that some new insight that's being offered. I will tell you that my process is I will look at the title that's written by the authors. I'll read the abstract, I'll read the keywords, and then I will come up with a prompt for Google Scholar. And I will put that prompt into Google Scholar. I will say, Google Scholar, show me only the reviews since 2022 that meet these keywords. And then I will look at each of those links. I'll click through, I'll read the abstract of the review article, and I'll make a decision. Is this sort of the same? Is this covering the same area? And I can tell you, one sure way to get rejected is when I type those keywords into Google Scholar and I see one whole page of a dozen, 10 to a dozen articles that all look like they're on the same topic, including the topic that's been submitted. That's sure grounds for rejection for lack of originality. So if you don't pass that bar, don't even bother sending your manuscript in, or you have to be prepared to justify why what you're doing is unique. Okay. Next, we're still on scientific quality and originality. The next prompt says, has the author provided enough sources to call the paper comprehensive, meaning that all relevant recent research on the topic is discussed? We do not expect comprehensive reviews to provide long historical perspective. So again, this is a bit of a judgment. We do want these papers to be comprehensive, but they don't have to be historically comprehensive, right? And so really what they should do is they should provide again, enough background to give the context, and then focus on recent advances in the field. You know, the next prompt, do authors rely excessively on citations of their previous papers? This, I would say this is more a problem in the peer-reviewed research literature rather than the review literature. Um, uh, it's seldom that someone is so dominant in a field that they would cite a lot of papers from themselves, but it does happen, and certainly it's poor practice. It's not appropriate. You know, I would say if you are a leading figure in the field, maybe cite less of your papers than you think that you should, just to give space to others that are active in the field. So it's not a popularity contest, right? It's not a means for you to boost your H index. So authors really should not be citing a lot of they should be citing relevant work, but that doesn't have to be exhaustive. The next prompt is an interesting one. To the best of your knowledge, is there a conflict of interest or significant bias that has affected the conclusions or any stated recommendations? If the answer to this is yes, you should call it out and use those confidential comments. I reviewed a recent article, and I'll try to obscure this so I'm not revealing anything. But basically, some of the authors were part of a process that the authors of the review article were describing in superlative terms. And I said, you know, that's not really appropriate, right? You're talking about your own work. And you're praising it. Like, let's tone that down a little bit, right? Like, science should be based on fact, and not hyperbole. And so I'll flag hyperbolic language, but especially hyperbolic language about your own work. You know, that's a no-no. So of course, you know, food science, as I'll say later, food science is an applied discipline. We work with folks in government and in industry, but of course, we want to make sure that the work that we're doing is not biased towards one company or one particular point of view. And certainly, there shouldn't be any funny business in terms of financial interest. The next category is impact on the field, and the prompt says, is this paper addressing a relevant food or nutrition industry concern? Now, again, hopefully if your editor-in-chief and your scientific editor and associate editor are doing their jobs, we should have already screened out stuff that's not addressing a relevant concern. Is this paper likely to be cited in 2 years? Again, this is a judgment call, but ask yourself, if I was working in this area, or maybe you are working in the area, is this something that I'm going to share with my graduate students? Is this something that I'm going to share with my colleagues? Is this a paper that I want to come back to and read from time to time, because I'll discover, you know, new nuances? So again, give us your opinion there. Is the manuscript likely to be useful to readers from industry? Now, again, this is a bit of a judgment call, especially if the person is not in the industry, right? If they're an academic or a government researcher. But again, hopefully we're multidisciplinary enough that we have some knowledge of what's going on. Remember that not everything might be immediately useful to industry, but food science is an applied discipline, and the work that we do should at some point eventually be relevant to solving a problem in the industry. So again, we're asking you to maybe put on your thinking hat a little bit, you're put on your imagining hat, and think about whether it would be useful, and give us your best guess. And if the answer is no, again, tell us why you think it's not applicable to the industry. Next prompt. Now we're moving on to scope and relevance. Is the manuscript applicable to the field of food science, in your opinion? And again, we're asking for an opinion here. Hopefully, if it's not applicable to food science, it will have been pre-screened and you won't be going out for review. But if it does make it out for review and you are reviewing a manuscript and you cannot see the connection to food science, that's really helpful to call that out in the review, right? So answer no to that prompt, but more importantly, expand on why you think it's not applicable. The next prompt is really sort of focusing on this interface, this interplay that we often have between food science and nutritional science, right? And so I sit in a building with folks in the Department of Nutritional Sciences, And really, the way that I describe it, and I've heard others describe it, is food science is everything about the food until the point that it reaches consumption, and then metabolism and stuff that goes on inside the body. That's more the purview of nutritional sciences. But again, with interest and work going on in the gut microbiome, we can see that there is sort of this fuzzy boundary. So again, really what we're looking for here is we're less interested in metabolism and physiology, and we're really more interested in the food's effect on health. So again, this should have been pre-screened, but if it makes its way to you and you feel that it is focusing too much on metabolism and physiology in the body, then call that out and explain, how the manuscript can be adjusted. Still talking now about scope and relevance. Does the manuscript present an adequate background and conceptual framework? So here's another subjective question. And obviously you want a review to have sufficient background to place the work in the necessary context. But remember that a review article is not the same as a book chapter. That background and conceptual framework should not constitute 75% of the article. I was handling a manuscript the other day, which I rejected editorially because the title promised lots of exciting things. But when I actually read the article, they didn't get to the really exciting things until the last quarter of the manuscript. They spent all the rest of this time marching through information that we already know, that's well established, that's in other review articles, that's in book chapters. So you need to provide that context, but the focus should be on the new contribution. What's the new synthesis that is being accomplished here? It's not just a recitation of stuff that everybody kind of knows. Is there a clear justification for the review? Again, unjustified or poorly justified reviews should never make their way out to the reviewers. But if it does happen, again, we need, if you don't think there's justification for the review, I want you to expand on that. Are controversies adequately discussed? Here, again, in many fields, there are some controversies. So if there are controversies and it's not settled science, then it's the job of the review to uncover that and explain that. And so again, if you are aware that there are controversies that the author perhaps has neglected, please do call that out. And then finally, on this particular topic, does the conclusion section identify gaps in knowledge and recommend future research? I find this is an area that's very hard for people to do. I read a lot of conclusion sections that just basically tell me a lot of platitudes and stuff that I already know. I would say, like, the criteria that I would use is, okay, if I was going to do research in this field and I read the conclusion section, does that conclusion section give me actual ideas for experiments and things that I need to do? Or is it just a lot of platitudes and, saying, oh, we need to work harder, and oh, there's still controversy, but no specifics, right? So reading that conclusion section should give someone very clear marching orders on what experiments they need to run next. And if it's not there, then please, that needs to be called out to us. The clarity of the presentation. Does the manuscript need substantial editing for English grammar and clarity? What we do not need from you are line edits, line by line edits, fixing the grammar. That's a job for a co-author. It's not a job for a reviewer. What I will do is, if I encounter a manuscript, this applies to science, original research as well as review articles, I will start to read it, and I will flag every grammar error I see for the first couple of pages. And if there's more than a dozen in the first couple of pages, there's not really, again, I'm not a co-author. I'm not going to fix the English, right? I will stop doing the line edits, and I will just make a comment to say that the manuscript needs to be edited for correct English usage. We try to stay away now from the phrase native English speaker because that's a little bit discriminatory. I know plenty of people who are native English speakers who are terrible writers. So we don't ask for a review by a native English speaker. We just ask for somebody who understands the language and can write grammatically correct English. What I will do in a manuscript that has poor quality English is after I flag the first couple of pages worth of errors, I will stop reading for grammar and just read for understanding. And if I encounter sentences later that because of the quality of the English, I simply cannot understand what the sentence says, then I will flag that. And I'll say this sentence is just simply not clear. The quality of the writing is improving, even if the quality of the science is not. Oh yeah, I remember what I meant to say with that. Yeah. So what I've discovered, thanks to large language models like ChatGPT, I think the quality of the writing that we are receiving is improving. Unfortunately, ChatGPT cannot really do the thinking for you, and so the science may be. It used to be relatively easy to recognize what might be poor quality science by the poor quality writing. That's a lot harder to do now. And so it really means that we need to read for the quality of the science, not just the quality of the writing. In terms of clarity, the prompt says, does the abstract concisely convey the contents and possible conclusions of the manuscript? There's 2 times when I will read an abstract to an article. One would be before starting my review or as I start my review. And the next time I will read the abstract is at the end of my review process, because what I often find is that abstracts are written first because it's the first part of the article. What I always tell my students is write the abstract last, right? Figure out what the article wants to be and what it wants to say. After you've figured out what the article says, then you can write the abstract and then maybe write the title. So you don't have to write it in order that it would be read. So yeah, so pay attention to that abstract and maybe read it again after you've reviewed the article, and just to make sure that the abstract really is reflective of the actual contents of the article. In terms of clarity of presentation, do figures and tables enhance the quality of the manuscript? I've reviewed a bunch recently where there's just a simple pie chart or a simple listing of 4 or 5 numbers. Well, if it's just 4 or 5 numbers that you want to convey to the reader, you can do that in a sentence or two. And a sentence or two takes up much less space than a figure, right? And so if the figures are really simple, I would suggest that you call them out. Tables are hard because very often in a review article you'll have several tables. They may be very long tables with lots of entries and lots of columns, but ask yourself, do the tables have all of the relevant columns? If you were reviewing the literature and you wanted a summary, is everything that the authors have put in that table relevant? Are there columns that could be deleted, or there's columns that should be added, right? And then the last question that I asked myself is, did the tables or figures take real effort? Again, I can't tell you the number of articles that I reject editorially where the figures are just simply screenshots of tables or screenshots of figures from other manuscripts. Like, to me, that's lazy scholarship. If I'm writing a review article and I really want to do a comprehensive review of the literature, that, in my opinion, that should result in the creation of new tables and new figures. We don't need you to rehash the literature. We can just go read the literature, right? So the review article really should help the reader understand something more than they would just get if they read those articles that were cited in the review. And so, and this really can become very clear when you look at the tables and figures, that they really should take some real effort on the part of the authors to produce, because they are going to be one of the key messages in that review article. One of the other questions, one of the other prompts is what is your opinion of the number of figures and tables? And this is again a judgment call. I think there should be enough, but not too many. But of course, this will depend upon the scope of the review. So, so think about that. You know, are there figures and tables that just should be deleted because they're not adding, or are there ones that the authors maybe missed and should have included? The next prompt is the length of the manuscript appropriate for clear presentation. And so again, as you heard in the beginning, comprehensive reviews considers review articles that are between 8,000 and 15,000 words, excluding references and tables. We do not expect reviewers to count words, right? We have staff that do that. If a manuscript is close to either of those two limits, it will be flagged by staff and before it comes to the editor-in-chief or the scientific editor or the associate editor. So we don't expect the reviewers to do that. But so if it's close, don't worry about it. What you should, as a reviewer, be thinking about is, you know, is this the right length for the story that you're trying to tell? Have you told an 8,000 word story that really needs to be a 14,000 word story, right? Or have you told an 8,000 word story that needs to be a 6,000 word story? And if so, that should just go to Journal of Food Science, where they handle the shorter review articles. So I would say be less concerned about the specific number of words and more concerned with the general feel. Is the length of the article appropriate for the content that's being communicated? The final sections, the recommendation, and of course the choices are accept, major revision, minor revision, or reject. I think people agonize over this a lot. I'm here to tell you, don't agonize over it. If it was just simply a voting process where we send it out for 2 or 3 reviewers and we look for a majority to win, you wouldn't need me as an editor, right? It would just be a simple vote, and the vote would go, and the process would crank on. So don't. I mean, certainly spend some time and think about this, but really. What matters is the substance, the words that you will write. It's less the box that you will check here. One place where I would give some advice is that if you really think that the work is pretty good and you think that your comments could be interpreted and reviewed by, let's say, an editor instead of being re-reviewed by you, then you can just indicate minor comments. And if I see that an author has a reviewer says accept or minor comments, I'm less inclined to send it back to them because they think it's pretty close. If a reviewer says major revisions, or if, let's say, a reviewer says reject, but the other reviewers and the editor think it's major revisions, it will definitely, or it should definitely, come back to the reviewer. But again, don't overthink your recommendation. It's much more important to use the other parts of the review. And I would say the confidential comments to the associate editor, that's probably the most important and underutilized box or text prompt. In this box, you can be as nasty, as blunt as you want to be, because this is a personal communication between you, the reviewer, and me, the editor. The author should never see that, right? And if I have anything to do with it, they never will see it. But here is where you, as the reviewer, can tell me, hey, this is absolutely terrible. There's no way this can be fixed. This must be rejected. Or, I said reject, but if they fix these things, it's pretty good, or, there's a lot of comments here. Maybe it's a reject, depending on what the other reviewers think. I'll leave it up to you, editor, but here's what I think. So please use that box. There's 2 ways I see the box used that are not helpful. One is to leave it blank, and the other is to paste all the same comments that you just pasted to the author, right? I don't need it. I mean, if you don't have anything to say, leave it blank, but that's not really helpful to me. And pasting the comments to the author in that box, that's also not really helpful to me, because I'm going to read the comments to the author. I don't need the same information in another box. When you are writing your comments to the author, be tough, but be fair. imagine if you were getting that review. What would you like to see? What would you not like to see? Don't be nasty. If I see comments that are really nasty, I will take them out. You really don't have to recommend rejection or acceptance in this box either, right? Again, you've given your recommendation in the recommendation checkbox, so you don't need to repeat the recommendation in the comments to the authors. And sometimes that can be confusing. If the manuscript is being rejected and you say that you think it's pretty good, and that it should be accepted, well, that's not really helpful to the editor who's trying to triangulate the opinions of multiple reviewers plus their own opinion to make a decision. So again, and if you need to vent, that's what the confidential comments are for, not to yell at the authors. A few final thoughts, comments that I have that didn't fit anywhere else. Remember, before you accept a review, you are given more time, but remember that you will need to leave yourself time to review the article. And these reviews are pretty long. They're significantly longer than regular manuscripts. And so if it usually takes you an hour to read a manuscript, maybe you should leave a couple hours to read the review. So plan ahead and start early if you can. I would say a late good review is better than an on time or an early poor review. If you get into the middle of the review process and you realize that this is a pretty good paper, but you also have a lot of comments, it's perfectly fine to ask for an extension of your deadline and contact the editor mid-review. Or if you really think this is a terrible manuscript that it should never have been sent out for the review and you don't want to waste your time on it, you can contact the editor about that as well. And get their advice. If they already have a couple of strong negative reviews, they certainly don't need a third review piling on. But if the other reviews are maybe split or they're on the fence, then if you're reviewer number 3, then we might really need to count on you to give insight that will hopefully tip the scales one way or the other. And then after the review process, when the editor issues the decision, I will always read the reviews from the other reviewers. I've done this ever since I was a brand new reviewer, even though I'm an experienced reviewer, having reviewed manuscripts for 30 plus years. I still, even though I'm an editor for a bunch of journals, I still will do reviews. Occasionally we'll do reviews for comprehensive reviews. I will certainly do reviews for journals where I'm not an editor, and may even review ones where I'm an editor, especially if I have some subject matter expertise. But all that said, even though I have lots of experience doing this, I always want to see how the other reviewers think. Am I in line with them? Am I being more critical than them? Am I being less critical than them? If you are a new reviewer just starting out, looking at those other reviews can be super helpful. I will, when I'm assigning reviews, if I know the people I'm assigning to, and I know I've got a couple of senior people and a junior person, I will always send it to the senior people and the junior people, and then hopefully the junior person will read the feedback to see. And it's funny, junior less experienced reviewers fall into 2 categories. One, they think everything is perfect and they couldn't possibly have any suggestions. And number 2, they're just really critical, and they're way more critical than the more senior reviewers. It's always better to start off more critical and to become mellow with age. But if you start off not having anything critical to say, I would say try harder, because there's always ways that a manuscript can be improved. And a good way to see whether you've hit the mark is to read the other reviews. And then just in terms of my own personal practices, I'm not the most on-time reviewer, I will say. I would struggle with what words to say here. I settled on I'm often late with my first review. But I will do the second review of the same manuscript very quickly. I will go in, I will look at basically the response to review for my comments. I will look at what the author's saying. I will see whether I agree or not. I will then read the manuscript and look for the sections where the changes are, especially my changes or the changes that I requested. And then I'll try to turn that around basically the same day that I get it. So yeah, so again, on-time reviews are helpful, but good reviews are even more helpful. And with that, I think that's my last slide. So I'm going to go ahead and yeah, stop sharing and be happy to take any questions or comments.
Oh, Don, just complementing what you described to us, I would like to point that because our reviewers are expected to be widely read and frequently cited, we should be really careful when we are doing a review because a weak review can propagate misconception, while a strong review can direct the future research. So we have a big responsibility. And in this case, a reviewer of a review should care because it's not only technical pointing and just taking care of that field of research.
Thanks, Marcy. Yeah, so we've got a good question in the Q&A. How comprehensive do you expect the review to be? And I will say it as comprehensive as it needs to be. And there's a second question. Is the literature searching strategy required in the manuscript? And I would say there's probably, depending upon the type of review. So there's a type of review that's become more popular or more common, which is a systematic review where you deliberately set out with a specific review strategy. And certainly, if the review is a systematic review, then having that literature search strategy be spelled out is very important, but it's not required. You can write a review article without that comprehensive strategy, and it still makes it valid. But again, here I would say, if you're reviewing an article that doesn't have a literature searching strategy, and you can see that the authors have clearly missed areas of the literature, then you're free to recommend that they consider those areas and perhaps do tell you as the reviewer what was your search strategy. That's a legitimate question to ask, but it's not required that it be answered. All right, and I see there's a bunch of discussion in the chat, but it looks like no questions there. Oh, I see some more questions in the Q&A. Yeah. Next question. Let's answer live and done. Okay. My question is not directly related to your presentation, but as a reviewer who spends his time to review a manuscript, how can we convince the journals to pay an incentive to the reviewers? Oh boy. That's a great question. And I would say that would be a question for the publishers. What I would say is, not to argue for the status quo, but the status quo is that as an author, you hope that people volunteer the time to review your manuscript. As a reviewer, you volunteer your time as an ad hoc reviewer. If you do a good job as an ad hoc reviewer, you get put on an editorial board. And that is a resume building activity. And so the reward for doing lots of unpaid reviews is you get to do more unpaid reviews, but you get to be listed on the editorial board. If you do a good job on the editorial board, then there's a possibility of an editor position. And editor positions are paid. Not enough, not nearly enough to compensate for the work that we do. I could make way more money consulting than I can being a journal editor. But I serve as a journal editor. The money is nice. I'm not going to give the checks back, but it's not. I don't do it for the money. But yeah, you make an excellent point, Saeed. It would be great if there could be an incentive, and I think publishers are trying to play with incentives, giving people access and things like that. But I wouldn't. It kind of is the situation that it is in science now, and I just don't. I like your idea, Saeed. I just don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon. But doesn't mean it's not a good idea.
There is one question in the chat. What should I write in the comments section when the author has satisfactorily addressed all the reviewer comments?
Oh yeah, just right. The author has satisfactorily addressed all of my comments, right? If you've looked at the response from the other reviewers, you can offer an opinion on that. You can say the author has satisfactorily addressed my comments, but I noticed that I don't think they've addressed the comments from reviewer one. If that's your opinion. But yeah, we really want the bulk of your work to come in the first review. If it's a really kind of a messy manuscript that needs a lot of work, you may also have substantive comments in the second review. But if you don't have substantive comments in the second review, it's perfectly fine to say all of my concerns have been addressed. How to become a reviewer for IFT journals? That's a great question, and maybe Amanda can weigh in on this. Certainly, we are always looking to expand our reviewer pool, but I don't know if there's a way that you can self-nominate for that. You can always email the editor-in-chief or an editor and say, hey, look, can you please add me to the review database? I will say that just putting your name in is probably not enough, right? You need to put in good keywords, and then your keywords need to be keywords that that are relevant to the kinds of reviewers that we're looking for. And then once you get the first opportunity to review, that's your chance to shine, right? That's your chance to do a phenomenal job that will impress the heck out of the editor, so they'll remember your name and they'll remember to ask you when they have that topic come up again. So really, until you get that first chance, it's a little bit of a random process. But once you have the actual opportunity, you know, then that's your chance to shine and to really impress. And I see Amanda's put a comment in here for Marcy to give her view as an AE. So yeah, by all means, please go ahead, Marcy.
And I'll interrupt real quick first. I did put a link
Sure.
in the chat also to everyone to our reviewer resources page. There is an application form that you can fill out to express your interest in being a reviewer. We do screen folks for meeting their criteria and then pass those names of those folks on to the associate editors.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Dawn. My role as associate editor is working in the review to understand if it's a strong review. A strong review should not simply summarize the literature, but it should go in a way to be well organized. It should have a logical framework, identifying gaps, proposing or explaining the ways of the contradictions, and guiding the future research. So when the review comes to me, this is the critical point that I am trying to find to see if it's going to reviewers or not. And we should be careful in a specific point, which is we should not unintentionally change the narrative of a specific field. Just because I pointed before, it's expected that these reviews will be widely assessed by the community. So the structure and the interpretation are also central, but the main point for me to try to find a way to see if it's a good review or not is the knowledge which is providing for the community and the way that the authors are connecting the findings. That's meaning it's like when Dons were explaining, it's not a book chapter. We should have something in addition. We should deliver this knowledge to the community in a way that it will be learned by our readers, and we are not expecting to misconcept in the fields. I think it's more or less that. And I think it's also very important what Don said before, that we are always exchanging to see if we are saying things if we are able to see in the same point. And we will sometimes contradict in some fields, but then we are going to a decision which is different than the recommendation of the review. And I think in this slide, Don, you was very clear, because we are having the comments of the reviewers, but we are not taking the decision exactly only on the comments of the one reviewer. We are receiving all the comments, and our job as editors is not just handling papers, is to receive the comments, is to analyze the comment and give back some background to the authors to improve the paper. So when you are sometimes sad because you recommended major revisions and then the editor decided minor revisions, it's the complete evaluation of the manuscript, and the opposite too. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Marcy. So we got a couple comments in the chat, but I'll take the comment in the Q&A first. How does the type of review, narrative review, systematic review, scoping review, meta-analysis, affect the reviewer's evaluation criteria? I will say the short answer is it doesn't, because there are not separate criteria for the separate types of reviews that the questioner asks. But what I would say is that you can address those subtleties in your comments. So there's no formal way to acknowledge, in the checkboxes what the criteria don't change depending on the type of review. Your criteria as a reviewer might change, but that's your own internal standards, and you should communicate that when you do the review. Let's see. As an experienced reviewer, what are the most common issues you notice in literature review manuscripts, particularly among junior authors? One that I forgot to call out in my other comments is people will sometimes not understand the purpose of a citation at the end of a sentence, right? I won't check every reference, but the first few that I encounter, I will read the article. Or I'll at least read the title of the article. So let me think of an example. So let's say somebody makes a statement that Listeria monocytogenes is a psychotrophic pathogen that particularly affects the elderly, the young, and immunocompromised and pregnant women. That's a valid scientific statement that we know is true. And then the article that they'll cite is an article on the effect of Listeria on cold plasma for inactivating Listeria on fresh fruits and vegetables. Well, yeah, you cited an article on Listeria. They may have made those comments that you attribute in the article, in the sentence to the article, but that's not an appropriate citation. That's an appropriate citation for the effect of cold plasma on Listeria on fruits and vegetables. It's not an appropriate reference for an article on the general background of Listeria. For that, you should cite a book chapter or a book or a review article on individuals impacted by listeriosis. So that's a common mistake that people make. So when you are citing something, it should be an article that is specifically designed to support that statement, not something on a vaguely related or slightly related topic. Mudasar has a very good comment or question. Why are papers rejected after the first revision, since the manuscript has already passed from the editors and the reviewers the first time? Partly that's should be an editor communication issue. I will try very hard when I see the first round of reviews to figure out whether this manuscript may still be rejected. And I'll call out, I'll say, well, reviewer 3 has made some particularly critical comments. If you cannot appropriately address the critical comments from reviewer number 3, your manuscript may still not be accepted or may still be rejected. So I try to communicate to the authors that this is really serious. You need to take this seriously. And if you cannot address this comment adequately, then your manuscript will not be published. Sometimes editors are less clear about that, but I will always try to warn the authors at least once, like, this is your last chance. if you don't fix this, your manuscript cannot be published. So it is possible that you could make it through the first round and still be rejected if you don't pay careful attention to what the reviewers are saying and what the author and what the editor is saying. Just because you've made it through the first round does not mean that your manuscript will be accepted. And there's boilerplate language in there to state that, but I also try to state it explicitly. We've got a question from Mebratu, who says, I received many review invitations by my email from editors of top tier journals in my field, and I did not do reviews before. What should I consider before I go to the details? Thank you so much. I guess you have to decide what you want your role to be in the scientific community. Writing manuscripts is important, but realize that for every manuscript that you publish, 2 or 3 other people have reviewed that. And so as a rule of thumb, for every article you publish, you should probably try to review at least 2 or 3 other articles, right? Because if that math doesn't work, then science stops. So again, some people review more than 2 or 3 for every one. Some people review less, but yeah, you have to decide if this is a game that you want to play, if this is a world that you want to be in. And I can tell you, as a journal editor for many years, having reviewers that show up day after day and do great work day after day, like those people are golden. Those are people whose names I remember. Those are people who I will buy a drink for at a conference, right? These are people are really important. And I would encourage you all to be those kinds of people. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. I see one more question. What do you think about some reviewers that use AI? If you use AI, you should declare it. Ultimately, I don't think our large language models are at the. I liken the help that I get from large language models to be like an experienced graduate student. I would never put them in charge of anything, but certainly they have value. But yeah, I certainly don't pretend to be able to detect AI, but I can detect a good review, right? And so if you do a good review with substance, that will look very different than a review that might have been written by an AI. So, but again, if you're going to use AI, you really need to call it out. Yeah, so comment on sometimes editors don't send manuscripts the first time to reviewers who've already done the job, as the second revision goes to other reviewers. Yeah, this is a tough thing. I try as an editor really hard. Oh, thanks for Amanda for calling out that there's you can declare AI use. Thanks for that. As an editor, I try very hard not to send the second revision to new reviewers. There are circumstances where I will do this, and it's those circumstances where, let's say, I send it out. I think I have 3 reviews on the first version. I only get 1 back, and it's not that good. And the other 2 people run out of time, or they're just not able to do it. And so, in an effort to move the manuscript forward, I don't like to do this, and I don't do it very frequently, but I may make a decision based on that 1 review. But I'll also try to call that out to the authors and say, hey, look, I tried to get 3 reviews. I only got 1. I want to move this forward, but I will tell you right now that when this comes back, I will send it to new reviewers, or I may send it to the 2 reviewers that didn't respond in time. It's the same thing, as it would be a new review for the authors. So yeah, it's not Mudasar, it's not a best practice, but it does sometimes happen. And again, I think the good editors try to do their very best to stop it from happening. But it can be a challenge. And I see John has come on the video. John, any final parting words for us?
Mainly just thanks to you, Don and Tomasi, for putting this together. I confess that I've always found reviewing review articles intimidating, not only because they're so long, but very often the people who are writing them are more expert in that field than I am. I think hearing from your perspectives really brought it home to me of sort of what is a review article trying to do? And I think there, even if you're kind of overlapping that research area, you can say something more informative. So I've certainly learned a lot from our conversation today. So thank you both
Thanks.
very much. Thank you to Amanda and the IFT staff for putting this all together, and thank you to the attendees. Amanda will be sharing the recording of this, and it'll also be available on the Early Career Researchers website. So with that, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.